Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be making this wonderful top. I have not decided what I'm going to name it yet, but basically it's just this cute top with like a mesh pattern on the bottom. So let's get right into our materials. We have weight for acrylic yarn, a darning needle, scissors, and a 4.25mm hook. Okay, so we're going to start off with basically a row that's going to be in between the top section and in between the mesh section. So we are going to do a row of foundation half double crochets, making a slip knot, putting our hook in, and then we're going to chain 2, yarn over and go into the side 2 loops of our first chain, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 1, and yarn over, pull through 3. Again, yarning over, going into the side 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 1, and yarn over, pull through 3. So we're just going to keep doing these foundation half double crochets until it reaches as wide as you want the mesh section to be. So when we do the top section, we're going to add it on in a smaller section. It does not have to be as wide as this first row is, so I recommend making it as wide as you want the bottom panel to be. So just continuing these foundation half double crochets. Alright, so I finished my first row, and the one important thing is you definitely want to make sure it's at least covering your bust section, but since I like to do it where like the bust section is a little bit in, I would make it a little bit further, but you're fine to do it just the bust section if that's what you prefer. But starting from here, we're going to be working on the mesh section, and then at the end, we'll be adding the bust section. So here we can either do a chain 2, or we can do a stacked single crochet. So I'm gonna try that because I used it on a different project recently and I really liked it, but feel free to do chain 2s when I say do a chain 2 or stacked single crochet, because it doesn't really make a difference. I'm just trying to see if I like it better for this specific top. So for a stacked single crochet, you're gonna turn your work, single crochet into the first stitch, and then single crochet into the front loop, like so. Next, for this row, we're going to be chaining 1 and skipping a stitch, double crocheting in the next. Chain 1, skip 1, double crochet in the next, and just repeating that the entire row. And coming up to the end, it's a little bit of a gamble whether you're going to end off with the right number of stitches or not, but it really doesn't matter because it's like a 50-50 chance. So coming up to the end, I'm ending up having 1 extra stitch. So basically I have 2 stitches and a chain, and what I would ideally have is 1 stitch and a chain, but it literally does not matter. If you have 2 stitches and a chain like me, you're chaining 1 here and double crocheting into the chain. If you have 1 stitch and the chain left, you're going to still be skipping 1, double crocheting into the chain. So either way, you're either in your 4th to last stitch or your 3rd to last stitch, and no matter what, you're going to chain 1, double crochet into the chain. Basically, even though we're skipping 2 here, it makes such little of a difference that you can't even really notice it. But if that is something that bothers you, you could definitely go back and remove 1 stitch from your last row and do it again, or you could not go into the chain, but I feel like it gives like a cleaner edge to go into the chain, so it kind of just depends on your preference. So starting our next row is another time that we can either do a chain 2 or a stacked single crochet. So I'm going to do my stacked single crochet again. And then we're going to be doing double crochets across this entire row. So I am going to be going into the chain. So we're going to do 1 double crochet into the chain, 1 double crochet into the stitch, all the way down the row. You are free to go into the gaps if you really want to, but again, it doesn't make that much of a difference. Going into the stitches just makes it so that your stitches don't really like move around, but it's not like they're really gonna be able to move around that much because it's only a chain one space. If it was a bigger chain space, it might be a bigger of a deal to do that, but whatever your preference is, just making sure you're doing one double crochet into the gap space either way, whether you're going to the chain itself or just going into the gap. And then in between those, we're doing one double crochet into the stitches. And all the way up to the end, we're going into the chain, into the double crochet, into the chain, and then either into your chain two or into your stacked single crochet, like so. For our next row, once again, we are going to be starting with the chain two or a stacked single crochet. And then we are going to chain four. And then we are going to do something a little bit weird here. Instead of skipping 4 stitches, we're going to skip 5. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and go into the one right after that with a double crochet. Chaining 4. And you can keep these chains pretty loose so that it doesn't end up like pulling too tight. And going into the 6th, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 with a double crochet. Chaining 4, skipping 5 with the double crochet after, all the way across the row. And here at the end, there's a very high chance that your stitches are not going to match up. So when we chain 4, then we're going to count how many stitches we have left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I have 10. So basically what you want to do, no matter how many stitches you have left, is go halfway across, chain 4, and then go to the end. So you're only doing this once you're like at this point though. You're not going to start that when you're over here. You're doing it when you have like around this amount of stitches, like around 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here I'm going into my 5th stitch with a double crochet, chaining 4, and going into my last stitch with a double crochet. So basically the ideal would be to have 12 stitches at the end, but you're just going to kind of like adjust accordingly so that it still fits. Starting our next row, again, chain 2 or stacked single crochet. Doing a double crochet in our first chain, a double crochet in our second chain, chaining 1, doing a double crochet back into that same chain, a double crochet in the next chain, and a double crochet in the last chain. My camera just cut off, so I'll just show you for our next gaps. Our first one is going to be a double crochet in the first chain, then 2 double crochets into the second chain. So you're basically doing an increase. Then you're going to chain 1 and do 2 double crochets into the next chain. So another increase essentially. and then 1 double crochet in your last chain. So you're essentially reflecting this same pattern, 1 double crochet and increase, the chain kind of splits it in half, increase, double crochet. And then you're gonna skip your double crochet from the last row and immediately go into the next chain for your next cluster, repeating that same pattern, 1 double crochet, 2 double crochets in the same chain, chain 1, 2 double crochets in the next one, but in the same chain, and then 1 double crochet in the last chain. Skipping our double crochet and continue on to the next one. And you're going to repeat this down for the rest of the row. For our last one, we're going to do it a little bit different, just like we did the first one different because we have our ending stitch. So we're going to do 1 double crochet, 1 double crochet into the next chain, and then we're not increasing here. We're going to go into our next chain, chain 1, double crocheting back into that same chain, 1 double crochet into the chain after, and then 1 double crochet into your last stitch, which is either going to be your stacked single crochet or your chain 2. And there we go. And starting our next row, we're either going to do a chain 2 or a stacked single crochet, just like we've been doing. And then we're going to chain 2 and double crochet into this gap made from the chain that we just did in our last row. Then we're going to chain 5, and double crochet into the next gap that was made from our chain 1 in our previous row. So the one thing to remember is that these double crochets that we're doing in this row should not line up with the double crochets we did 2 rows ago. They should essentially be like every other. So chaining 5, double crochet into the next gap from the middle of our cluster, making sure it's not lining up. Chain 5 into the next one. Chain 5 into the next one. Continuing that all the way down the row. Chain 5s in between each of these. And then for your last one, you're going to chain 5, go into that last chain space here, chain 2, and double crochet into the last stitch, which is going to be your stacked single crochet or your chain 2 from the last row. And there we go. For this next row, starting off with a chain 2 or stacked single crochet, turning our work, doing 2 double crochets, 1 into each chain here, and then we're going to chain 1, skip this double crochet, and do 5 double crochets into the next gap. But again, I'm going right into the stitches. You feel free to just go right into the gap, whichever one you prefer. Just remembering that since we are going into a chain 5 gap, if you aren't going right into the stitches, there is a lot of room for your new stitches to move around. But if that doesn't really matter to you, you can just go right into the gap. Remembering chaining 1 in between and doing our 5 double crochets into the next gap. Chaining 1, 5 double crochets after, and continuing this all the way down the rest of your row. At the end, we're chaining 1, doing 2 double crochets into those last chains, and a double crochet into your last stitch, which is your stacked single crochet or your chains. For our next row, as usual, chain 2 or stacked single crochet. And then we're going to go back to a chain 1, skip 1, double crochet row. So chaining 1, skipping 1, double crochet, chain 1, skip 1, double crochet, and then all the way up to the end, chaining 1, double crocheting into your chains or stacked single crochet. For our next row, starting off as usual, stacked single crochet or chain 2, and then for this row, we're double crocheting into every single stitch. So when we come up to a chain, we're just double crocheting into it, and again, you can double crochet into the gap or into the chain itself. Either way, just doing double crochets into every single stitch and chain across this row. And then coming up to the end, putting our double crochets into every single stitch. Including our last chain or stacked single crochet. So now here is where technically the mess section is over. But if you want more rows, you have 2 options. You could either start from this row and continue on. I'll put the name of this row on the screen so you don't have to like count, so that you're repeating like these again, because essentially these rows are pretty similar. So it's just like this and then that and then again, like every other basically. Or you could just do another row of these double crochet, chain 1, skip 1 double crochets, or you could just do more double crochet rows. You really are free to do whatever you like for if you're adding more rows here. And there is another optional thing that I'm gonna do that you definitely don't need to do, but I think it makes your top look a little bit more finished. So if you can see, like these sides here kind of look a little bit like wiggly and like they're not very even. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to single crochet a border around so that it looks a little bit more even. So even if you add more rows after this and you want the edges to look more finished, you can do the same thing that I'm going to show right now, which is basically just going to be single crocheting all the way around the border of the top. So my rule of thumb for when I'm doing this is put as many single crochets into it as how wide the stitch is. So essentially, stacked single crochets and chain 2s are going to have 1 single crochet into each section of it. So each single crochet is going to have a single crochet into it, and for the chain, each chain is going to have a single crochet into it. And then the rest of this is all just double crochets, so you're going to put, again, 2 single crochets into them. You want to try to space it out evenly so that you're not just putting like 2 single crochets right there and then skipping that and jumping here. You want like 1 single crochet here, 1 single crochet there, but it's not really that much of like an art or like perfection. You're just kind of trying to get single crochets where you can get them. So we're starting off with a chain 1 and doing our first single crochet into the side and a second one. And then now we're moving on to our stacked single crochet, doing 2 single crochets here, moving on to a double crochet, 2 single crochets, a stacked single crochet again, or again your chain 2s, 2 single crochets, 2 single crochets in the double crochet. It's very, very simple. You're just doing 2 single crochets essentially into like the side of each row. And then even our foundation half double crochet row, we're still going to put 2 single crochets into it. The second one is basically just going to be in the corner. You're going to do your single crochet, you're going to chain 1, and you're going to do a single crochet back into that same spot and turn your work. Now, it is a little bit torturous, but you're just going to have to do single crochets across this entire row, making sure that you're not doing them too tightly because we are going to have to crochet into them in just a little bit. Coming up to this corner, we're still doing our single crochets into every stitch. Once we get to that corner, we're doing a single crochet, chain 1, single crochet into the same spot like we've been doing, and then we're going to start by doing just 1 more single crochet here because the second single crochet in our little single crochet chain 1 single crochet counts as our first single crochet for this side. And then we're going to move on and do 2 single crochets into the double crochet. And so again, we're just doing 2 single crochets into each row all the way down this side, trying to get them to be put evenly in the row. Once you single crochet in the corner, you can either decide to single crochet, chain 1 single crochet, and go across the bottom of your top, but that's definitely not necessary, so I'm just going to chain 1 and cut off my work. If you do go all the way across, once you get to this bottom corner, like over here, then you're going to chain 1 and cut off your work right there. And then pulling through, and there we go, we have the base of our top finished. And I do find that no matter how loose you do these single crochets, you are going to kind of have to like stretch it out a little bit, just make sure it matches the size, and then there you go. So now is where you decide how wide your bust section is going to be. So again, on this one, I made it so that it didn't reach all the way to the edge. So at this point, you're going to want to decide either how far over you're going to cut it off so that it's like the front bust section, or you're just going to do it all the way across. Either way, it doesn't really make a difference. It just kind of like gives a different appearance to it. But I would definitely err on the side of caution because while this top does fit me, it is quite far over. So I would definitely be a little bit cautious, especially because we're going to be doing half double crochets, but half double crochets don't tend to stretch sideways very much. So you definitely want to be very cautious about that, especially because it can be very frustrating if you finish the top and it doesn't fit. Ask me how I know. So what I'm gonna do is for this one, I am like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-ish gaps over. So I'm honestly gonna go like 3 gaps over instead so that I 100% make sure that I have enough room. But what you're gonna do, since you don't have anything to compare it to, is when you're gonna hold it up and hold this top section as if it's the top of the top. So like put it at like the very tippy top that it could reach, and then stretch it around towards the back, and then just measure like kind of with your fingers where you want it to stop. So like I'm holding right here, and I'm gonna like hold this spot and take it off like there. And so that was actually pretty much at the third gap. Once you've decided that, or if you're just gonna do straight across to be safe, then you're gonna tie your yarn on. And so I'm gonna line up with this gap and tie my yarn on just with a normal knot, but I'm gonna double knot it just in case. There we go. And then what you're gonna do is put your hook in, pull through, and chain one, and then you're gonna half double crochet from the next stitch over up to whatever matches that point on the other side. But again, if you're going all the way across, you're tying your yarn in your corner and half double crocheting the entire row. Okay, so I'm coming up towards the end, and I'm just gonna keep checking to make sure that I stop above the stitch that matches the other side. So that would be this stitch. And so there we go. That is the start of our bust section. So what I would do now is just be overly cautious, pull this up, and stretch it sideways and make sure that it covers everything it needs to cover, so that you again don't have to go back and redo rows. And just a reminder, if you're not doing these like smaller bust rows, you're going all the way up to the end to right here and crocheting in your last stitch, which it is going to be a little bit confusing because you have your single crochet, chain one, single crochet, but just kind of like pull it apart like this, and you can tell that your gap is like right here, so you're going to stop crocheting right there, like right here, because this is your gap and you don't need to crochet into that because that's kind of like technically increasing your row. So now what we're gonna do from now on is half double crochets for every row until it reaches the height that you want it to be, that it covers enough. So the way I'm doing it is that the bust section starts right here, but you could make it so it starts right here. Either way, the only thing is that these stitches are not matching this, so it kind of just depends what you're looking for. So I'm going to start my next row with a chain one, turning my work, and half double crocheting into every single stitch, going all the way across. All the way up to our last stitch, and there we go. Now we're just going to repeat these rows until it reaches the height that you want it to be, and I will come back once I have finished my half double crochet rows, and then we're going to finish off the bust and add the straps. Okay, so now I'm done with my half double crochet rows, and we're going to do our last row for the bust section and then our straps. So for this row, starting as we were doing for the mesh sections, we're either going to chain two or do a stacked single crochet. And then we're going to chain one, skip one, and double crochet, just like we've done a couple times in the mesh section, chaining one, skip one, double crochet, all the way across this row. Alright, and coming up to the end, just remembering that you might not end up having the correct number of stitches here, which I still don't. So here I have 2 stitches and a chain at the end, where I should have just 1 stitch and a chain, but regardless, I'm chaining 1, skipping these 2 stitches, and putting my double crochet into the last stitch. So it does not really make a difference if you have an extra stitch there, you're still just going to chain 1 and double crochet into the end. Okay, so you technically have a couple of options when you're doing straps for this top. With this one, since I have it basically just fitting the front of me for the bust section, I can just do the halter ties and that works completely fine. And then I have this back tie towards the bottom. But if your top wraps around the back pretty far, if you just do the halter top, it's gonna feel like it's like sitting too widely, most likely. Some people might like how it looks regardless, but for instance, you're still gonna want the halter ties in the front of the top. So if like your tie is right here and then all of this is going behind you, that's not really gonna fit 100% perfectly. So what you could do is still do these two ties that I'm gonna show you, and then you could also do a tie that goes like across like this, and basically do that. You could either do chains or these chains with single crochets in them, and then cut off that strand, and then you're just gonna weave it through. If that doesn't entirely make sense, I show how to do that in my mesh halter top crochet tutorial. So basically you would just like skip to the strap section. But again, like that's totally optional, you don't need to do it. And what I would recommend is just doing these two ties that I'm about to show you, trying it on, and then if you don't like it, then adding the back tie, because it is gonna add like another element to the top that isn't like technically built into the pattern. The other thing that you could do as well is if you just want the tie to be like a couple stitches over, that's completely fine. I don't think that would look like it's standing out too much, but for mine, I am going to be doing it like on the complete edge. Another alternative you could do is starting off your tie with a thicker band and then making it thinner, but that only would really work if it's not going that far around to your back. Mine's like kind of just like under my armpit, because if it's all the way going around to your back, doing it like that is going to make like a really big dramatic decrease into your strap. So what we're gonna do is start by chaining whatever length you want your strap to be. And just remember when you're holding it up to test your size of your strap, that chains are more stretchy than solid stitches are. So you could totally get to this end of the chain and cut it off there and not put stitches into them if you want it to be super stretchy, but I'm going to be putting stitches into them, so I do need to be careful that I'm making sure it's long enough even with there being stitches in them, because it's not just going to be chains. So if you're going to cut it off here, you're going to chain one extra and cut it off here and then pull through, and that's the end of your strap. But if you're doing solid stitches like I am, you're just going to start crocheting back down the chain. You can do single crochets, half double crochets, double crochets, literally any stitch into them. You could do slip stitches as well, but I do feel like that sometimes doesn't always look the most uniform in chains, but feel free to do as you please as you work back down your chain. Coming up to the end, we're going into our last few chains. And then we're going to turn so that it's lined up going like towards the project. And if you have a single crochet, you're going in the next stitch over. If you have a double crochet, you're going 2 stitches over, and half double crochet, again 1 stitch over. Either way, making that slip stitch into the next stitch, making 1 more slip stitch, chaining 1, and cutting off our work. Okay, and now unfortunately we have to count how many stitches we did for this so we can recreate it on the other side. So let's do that really quick. So I have 65 stitches, which means I had 66 chains. So just remember that the whatever number of chains you did is going to be 1 extra than the number of stitches you have, which if you're 1 off when doing the second strap, it's not going to make a huge difference. But just so you know, what we're going to do is go into this top corner on the opposite side of this top row, and we're going to hook our yarn through and then tie it on with a knot. I like doing a double knot. And then we're going to start those chains. And just remembering, even if you just did chains for this instead of stitching right back down, you do still need to count them and replicate it on this side. And again, if you're just doing chains, here's where you would cut it off, making sure that you have one extra chain still, because that extra chain gets like flattened out when you tie it off. Otherwise, we're going to start single crocheting, half double crocheting, or double crocheting all the way back down. Coming up to that last stitch, we're putting our last crochet into it, turning our work, and if you have a single crochet, you're going in the next stitch over. If you have a double crochet, you're going 2 stitches over, and half double crochet, again 1 stitch over. Either way, making that slip stitch into the next stitch, making 1 more slip stitch, chaining 1, and cutting off our work. And then now we just need to do the back ties. So it's going to be basically the same thing. Going into the top corner and tying on our yarn. Chaining whatever length you want to do, and either cutting that off so it's just the chains, or stitching back down them. Either chaining 1 extra and cutting it off, or working back down those chains. Getting down to that bottom chain. And then turning our work. Slip stitching into the next one down, or 2 down if you're doing double crochets, and then slip stitching into the next stitch, chaining 1, cutting off our work. Pulling through, and then we're going to repeat the same thing on the other side, making our last strap. Going into the corner, tying our yarn on, pushing our hook through, and chaining the same amount that you did on the other side, remembering to add 1. And coming up to our last chains, going into every single one with our stitches. Turning our work, and then slip stitching in the next stitch over, and then the next one over, chaining 1 and cutting off our work. Pulling through, and there we go. We are completely done other than weaving in our ends. So I'm going to show you one example of doing that, and then I will probably just finish them off camera later on. So the easiest way to thread your darning needle is to lay it over the top, pinch it, pull it off, and then whip it through, and then there you go. Then we're just going to go through the sides of some stitches, through the actual stitches a couple times, back the other direction, and then we can cut it off. And there we go. You're just going to repeat that with all the other ends in your top, but otherwise we are done. Thank you so much for watching. If you made one of these, please make sure to tag me. I would love to see it. If you have any questions, make sure to let me know down below. Make sure to check out my Depop for crochet stuff I'm selling. and look at my Instagram, Pinterest, TikTok to stay updated on all my pictures and videos of stuff I'm crocheting. If you have any videos you would like to see, make sure to let me know down below and I will try to make them. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you next time. Bye! I hope you know that when I like completely miss a stitch like that, it's because I'm staring at the camera viewfinder trying to see if I'm in frame. So I'm just literally not able to do that reverse hand-eye coordination. Like over here, like over here, oh my god, like over here, like over, like over here,